On the edge of Willow Creek, where the forest thinned and the dirt road veered into a tangled thicket of brush and wildflowers, Emily Carter stood before what remained of a cabin. The blackened timbers jutted into the sky like broken bones, charred by a fire that had consumed everything but the stone foundation and a few stubborn fragments of wall. Her hand rested on the splintered doorframe, and despite the cabin's ruinous state, she felt a flicker of hope. This would be her fresh start. Emily was 6 months pregnant and carried more than just the child growing inside her. She bore the weight of a life unspooling. The divorce from Peter had left her raw, the bitter end of a marriage that, for years, had felt like a cage rather than a home. The corporate law firm where she had spent a decade climbing the ladder now seemed like a distant, cold world she no longer belonged to. The relentless hours, the endless battles in court, and the sterile city apartment had drained her spirit. When the final papers were signed and the dust settled, Emily knew she had to leave it all behind. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. She had discovered the cabin through a late-night online auction, a burned-down relic that no one else wanted. It sold for $5,000, half of her savings. But to Emily, it was priceless. A chance to rebuild, to find peace amidst the ruins, and to raise her child away from the noise and judgment of her old life. The breeze whispered through the skeletal trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and smoke long faded. Emily stepped cautiously inside the cabin's remains. The floorboards were mostly gone, replaced by dirt and scattered debris. Broken glass crunched beneath her boots, mingling with charred wood and ash. Yet, beneath the rubble, something caught her eye. A glint of metal. She knelt down, brushing away soot and splinters, revealing a small, partially intact metal box nestled beneath a displaced floorboard. The box was heavy and cold to her touch, its surface mottled with rust, but still holding firm. Curiosity sparked within her, momentarily pushing aside the fatigue that clung to her bones. Emily's fingers trembled slightly as she searched for a way to open it. The latch was stiff, but yielded with a soft click. Inside, she found a collection of old journals, yellowed photographs, and a folded, hand-drawn map. The journals were bound in cracked leather, their pages brittle but filled with neat, looping script. The photographs were sepia-toned, capturing moments from decades past, faces worn by time, and places she did not recognize. The map bore the unmistakable marks of a hand who knew these woods intimately, with trails and landmarks labeled in fading ink. She sat back on the cold foundation stones, cradling the box against her belly where her unborn child stirred with gentle kicks. Emily's mind raced. Who had lived here before? What stories had these woods witnessed? The possibility of uncovering a hidden past buried within the ashes of this cabin stirred something deep inside her, a mix of determination and a yearning for connection. Her thoughts drifted back to her life in the city. She had been a corporate lawyer, a woman defined by contracts and courtrooms, deadlines and negotiations. The transition from that world to this small, forgotten place in the forest was jarring. Her friends had questioned her choice, warning that isolation would only deepen her loneliness. But Emily needed this. Space to heal, to breathe, to prepare for motherhood without the suffocating pressures of her former life. The night was falling fast, and the chill in the air crept into her bones. The cabin offered little shelter, but Emily was determined. She unpacked a worn blanket and a small kerosene lamp she had brought along, lighting it carefully to cast a warm glow over the scattered papers. The flickering light danced across the journals as she flipped through the pages, reading fragments of a life long past. The handwriting was elegant, the words hinting at daily struggles and small triumphs, a story that seemed intertwined with this place. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the distant call of an owl. Emily pulled her jacket tighter around her and allowed herself a small smile. This cabin, these forgotten belongings, they were the first threads in a tapestry she was only beginning to unravel. Here, in the quiet ruins, she would find a new path. As she settled onto the stone foundation, the baby kicked again, a reminder of new life growing amidst the shadows of the old. Emily closed her eyes briefly, letting the sounds of the forest wash over her. Tomorrow, she would explore the woods, follow the map, and uncover the stories hidden in these trees. For now, she would rest, holding onto a fragile hope that from destruction, something beautiful could grow. The morning light filtered softly through the fragmented roof of the cabin, casting dappled patterns on the scorched earth beneath Emily's feet. She rose slowly, the weight of her pregnancy making each movement deliberate and careful. The kerosene lamp's faint glow had long since flickered out, replaced by the gentle hum of birdsong and the fresh scent of dew on leaves. Determined, Emily tightened her jacket and stepped deeper into the ruins. The metal box clutched firmly in her arms. The journals had consumed her thoughts overnight. Their pages whispered secrets of a life once lived here, and Emily was eager to uncover more. But first, she needed to understand the physical space, the cabin and its surroundings, to piece together the story locked within the fragile leather bindings. The cabin's remains were a puzzle. The fire had ravaged much of the structure, but Emily noticed that some areas fared better than others. Near the back, where the fires seemed less intense, a corner of the floor was surprisingly intact. As she brushed away layers of ash and debris, her fingers struck something solid beneath the dirt. A trapdoor, cleverly concealed and nearly forgotten. Her breath caught. With effort, she pried the door open, revealing a narrow stairway descending into darkness. A rush of cold, stale air escaped, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and something older, untouched. Emily fetched her flashlight from her backpack and descended carefully, each step sending echoes through the small, underground space. The cellar was cramped, its walls lined with rough-hewn stones, damp and cool to the touch. Shelves, though warped and dust-covered, held remnants of a life preserved against time and destruction. Old tin cans, glass jars filled with faded contents, and stacks of papers tied with brittle twine. In the far corner, a leather satchel rested, surprisingly intact despite the years. Emily's fingers trembled as she opened the satchel, revealing more journals, photographs, and small trinkets. A pocket watch, a rusted key, and a bundle of letters tied with a faded red ribbon. The letters bore a familiar script, matching the handwriting in the journals she had found upstairs. They hinted at a story beyond simple survival, of secrets, relationships, and a life intertwined with the forest itself. Cold seeped into her bones despite the shelter, and the cabin's exposure to the elements offered little comfort. Rain from a passing storm had soaked through the broken roof the night before, leaving puddles among the rubble and dampening the ground beneath her feet. The wind howled through the gaps in the walls, a reminder that this place was far from a home, at least for now. Emily felt the sting of loneliness more keenly in these moments. The physical hardships of living here, even temporarily, pressed down on her. Nights spent shivering beneath thin blankets, days battling exhaustion and the constant ache of pregnancy, and the isolation that came with this forgotten corner of the world. Yet, despite the discomfort, a fierce determination grew within her. This was her refuge, her sanctuary amid chaos. As the day stretched on, Emily mapped out the immediate area, using the hand-drawn map as her guide. The map showed winding trails, the location of a nearby stream, and a cluster of trees marked with a symbol she didn't recognize. She followed the path into the forest, the soft earth muffling her footsteps. Birds flitted through the branches, and sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. The forest was alive, breathing stories through the rustle of leaves and the chirping of insects. Emily felt a connection here she hadn't known she needed, a link to something enduring, something beyond the pain of her past. She paused at the stream, watching the water ripple over smooth stones, reflecting the sky in fractured patterns. The map indicated a clearing nearby, and she made her way toward it, curiosity pulling her forward. In the clearing, Emily found the remnants of an old fire pit, surrounded by stones blackened with soot. Nearby, a weathered wooden bench leaned against a tree, its surface scarred and worn. It was as if someone had sought solace here long ago, just as she did now. She ran her hand over the rough wood, imagining the stories this place could tell if it could speak. Returning to the cabin as dusk settled, Emily carried a small bundle of wildflowers she had picked along the trail, a gesture of respect to the life that had once flourished here. Inside the cellar, she arranged the journals and letters carefully, the flickering light of her lamp casting long shadows on the stone walls. Throughout the evening, she read the entries aloud softly, her voice mingling with the crackling fire she managed to coax from damp wood. The journals spoke of a man named Thomas Wilder, a woodsman who had lived here decades before. His words painted a picture of a solitary figure, deeply connected to the land, fighting to protect the forest and his community from encroaching threats. Emily felt a kinship with Thomas, both of them seeking sanctuary amid turmoil, both bearing burdens that few could understand. The discovery of the trap door and cellar had unlocked a deeper layer of his story, and with it, a new purpose formed in her heart. This was more than just a burned cabin. It was a gateway to uncovering a legacy. As night deepened, Emily sat by the dying embers. The metal box and its contents spread before her like a map to the past. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the promise of stories yet to be told. She traced the lines of the hand-drawn map once more, committing the paths to memory. Tomorrow, she would delve further into the forest, follow the trails Thomas had sketched, and seek answers buried not just in pages, but in the very earth itself. The hardships of the day, the cold, the rain, the ache in her body, faded into the background, replaced by a quiet resolve. Emily knew that this journey would not be easy. The cabin was fragile, the forest vast, and her own strength limited by the life growing inside her. But with each discovery, she felt herself grow stronger, more grounded. In this place of ruins and secrets, Emily Carter was beginning to rebuild, not just a home, but a story worth telling. The following morning, Emily carried the leather-bound journals carefully into the small-town library, a modest brick building nestled between the post office and a dusty cafe. The library's wooden door creaked as she pushed it open, stepping into the cool, quiet air scented faintly with old paper and polished wood. The librarian, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses, looked up from her desk. "Good morning," Emily said, offering a tentative smile. "I was hoping you could help me identify the original owner of these journals." The librarian, whose name tag read Mrs. Evelyn Harper, adjusted her glasses and gestured toward a small table by the window. "Of course, dear. Let's take a look." Emily settled at the table, spreading the journals out before her. Mrs. Harper's eyes brightened as she flipped through the pages, recognition dawning. "These belong to Thomas Wilder," she said softly. "He was a bit of a local legend around here." Emily listened intently as Mrs. Harper recounted what she knew. Thomas Wilder had been a woodsman and trapper living on the outskirts of town during the early 1900s. Many townsfolk spoke of him with a mixture of respect and mystery. He was known as a protector of the forest, a man who valued the land deeply, but few had truly understood the extent of his efforts. Over the next few hours, Emily pored over archived newspapers, town records, and faded photographs. The library's resources, though limited, offered pieces of a puzzle she was eager to assemble. A faded article from 1912 described Wilder's role in organizing local efforts to prevent illegal logging. Another, more cryptic entry hinted at strange disappearances in the surrounding woods. Events whispered about, but never fully explained. As the afternoon light waned, Emily sat back, the weight of the discoveries settling over her. Thomas Wilder was more than a solitary woodsman. He was a man who had fought to safeguard his community and the forest they all depended on. Yet, his story had been obscured by time, buried beneath layers of silence and forgotten history. With Mrs. Harper's encouragement, Emily reached out to Dr. Mark Bennett, the town's local historian and university professor. Their first meeting was arranged in the library's small conference room, where dusty bookshelves lined the walls and sunlight spilled through tall windows. Dr. Bennett was a tall man with a thoughtful demeanor, his eyes sharp behind thick glasses. As Emily laid out the journals and shared her findings, he listened carefully, nodding with growing interest. "These journals are a remarkable find," he said. "Wilder's handwriting matches other documents I've seen from that era, and his accounts could shed new light on the town's early struggles. There's a lot we don't know about the challenges faced by rural communities back then, especially when it comes to preserving their natural resources." Together, they began to piece together Wilder's life and legacy. Dr. Bennett helped authenticate the journals, cross-referencing dates and events with historical records. They discovered references to a powerful logging company that had operated in the region, one whose aggressive practices threatened the forest and the livelihoods of those who depended on it. Emily was struck by the parallels between Wilder's fight and her own need to protect the fragile history she had uncovered. The journals spoke of meetings held in secret, letters exchanged with town officials, and a growing tension between the community and the logging interests. Wilder had been at the heart of this conflict, standing firm against forces that sought to exploit the land without regard. As the days passed, Emily balanced her time between the library and the cabin, her body growing wearier but her resolve strengthening. She returned repeatedly to the journals, uncovering entries that hinted at hidden caches of evidence, documents that Wilder had concealed to protect the truth. One journal entry detailed a plan to hide proof of the logging company's illegal activities within the cabin itself, a desperate measure to ensure the information survived, even if Wilder could not. This revelation deepened Emily's commitment. The burned cabin was not just a ruin. It was a vault safeguarding a vital story. The local community began to take notice of Emily's presence and inquiries. Some were curious, while others were wary, their faces guarded as whispers circulated. But Emily found quiet allies in unexpected places. A few elderly residents who remembered stories passed down from their parents, and Mrs. Harper, who offered encouragement and a steady source of information. One afternoon, as Emily and Dr. Bennett pored over a fragile map in the library, a young woman approached them. She introduced herself as Clara, a lifelong resident whose family had worked in the forest for generations. Clara spoke hesitantly, but with conviction, about the logging company's shadow over the town, and the silent fear that had kept many from speaking out. There were things we didn't talk about, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Disappearances, accidents, people who vanished without explanation. Some said it was the forest itself, but others knew it was something darker, something tied to those men with the saws and money. Emily felt a chill, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The mysterious events hinted at in the newspapers, the hidden documents, the burned cabin, all threads woven into a complex tapestry of greed, silence, and resistance. With Clara's stories added to their research, Emily and Dr. Bennett planned their next steps. They would need to dig deeper, to uncover the truth buried beneath decades of silence. The journals and letters had opened a door, but beyond it lay a tangled history that would challenge everything the town believed. Through it all, Emily found herself transformed. The pain of her past, the uncertainty of her future, and the physical toll of pregnancy faded into the background as purpose took hold. She was no longer just a woman seeking refuge. She was a guardian of a forgotten legacy, a voice for those who had been silenced. As she left the library that evening, the sun setting behind the trees, Emily glanced back at the worn journals in her bag. They were more than relics. They were keys to a story that demanded telling, a story that might finally bring justice to Thomas Wilder and the town he had fought to protect. The path ahead was uncertain, but Emily was ready to follow it wherever it led. The days that followed were a whirlwind of discovery and unease. Emily and Dr. Mark Bennett dove deeper into the journals, piecing together a narrative that grew more complex with every entry. Thomas Wilder's words revealed a man not only deeply connected to the forest, but fiercely committed to protecting it from a powerful and ruthless adversary. A logging company whose reach extended far beyond the town's borders. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the library windows, Emily uncovered a series of entries that lifted the veil on Wilder's clandestine battle. The journals detailed meetings held in secret, late-night correspondences, and whispered strategies aimed at exposing the company's illegal logging practices. Wilder had gathered a small group of townsfolk who shared his determination, risking threats and intimidation to stand against the encroaching destruction. Emily read aloud a passage describing Wilder's frustration and resolve. They think the forest is theirs to take, that no one will stand in their way. But we know better. We will fight, not just for ourselves, but for the land that sustains us all. The more Emily learned, the clearer it became that Wilder's fight had not been a quiet one. His journals hinted at the corruption woven into the town's leadership, the complicity of officials who turned a blind eye to the logging company's excesses. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. To authenticate these findings and explore the historical context, Emily reached out to Dr. Bennett, who arranged access to the town's archival records stored in an old municipal building. The archive was a dim, musty room filled with towering shelves of documents, many fragile with age. Inside, they hoped to find concrete proof of the logging company's illicit activities, contracts, correspondence, and records that Wilder had referenced but never fully revealed. Their first visit was cautious. Emily's pregnancy made the long hours more taxing, and the cramped, dusty environment offered little comfort. Yet their determination pushed them forward. Using gloves and careful hands, they sifted through piles of papers, scanning each document for clues. Days passed with little breakthrough until Dr. Bennett unearthed a bundle of letters stamped with the company's seal. The letters discussed plans to bypass regulations, manipulate land surveys, and silence dissenters. One particularly damning memo outlined a strategy to discredit Wilder and his allies, painting them as troublemakers intent on halting progress. Emily felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. These weren't just historical artifacts. They were evidence of a deliberate campaign to suppress the truth and exploit the forest for profit. It was the legacy of greed that had scarred the land and the community. As they prepared to leave the archive one afternoon, Emily noticed a shadow lingering near the entrance. A man in a dark coat, watching them with a steady gaze. She felt a sudden surge of unease, a warning she couldn't ignore. The weight of the journals and documents she carried felt heavier in that moment. Returning to the cabin, Emily found her resolve hardening. The burned structure, once a symbol of loss, now stood as a fortress guarding secrets that demanded to be told. She shared the new evidence with Dr. Bennett, who cautioned discretion but agreed on the importance of bringing the story to light. Meanwhile, the physical challenges of living in the cabin intensified. Rainstorms seeped through the broken roof, turning the floor into mud and chilling her to the bone. Nights were long and restless, her body aching with the demands of pregnancy and the cold that seemed to seep into her very soul. Yet she refused to abandon the place that had become her refuge and her mission. Emily's growing connection to Thomas Wilder's story was mirrored by a deepening bond with Dr. Bennett. Their shared purpose forged a partnership that extended beyond research, offering support amid the mounting pressures. Together, they planned their next steps: how to protect the artifacts, how to navigate the town's wary reception, and how to prepare for the inevitable backlash from those who wished the truth to remain buried. One afternoon, Emily received an unexpected visit from Robert Gaines, a man whose name echoed through the town as a powerful figure in the logging industry. He arrived unannounced at the cabin, his polished demeanor and expensive suit stark against the rugged backdrop of the forest. "I hear you found some interesting things," Gaines said smoothly, his eyes scanning the scattered journals and maps. "It would be in everyone's best interest if you consider selling the cabin and whatever you've uncovered." Emily felt a surge of defiance. Gaines's presence was a clear warning, a reminder that the fight Wilder had begun was far from over. She met his gaze steadily. "This isn't just about property," she said quietly. "It's about the truth." Gaines's smile faltered, replaced by a cold calculation. "Think carefully, Miss Carter. Some stories have consequences." After his departure, Emily confided in Dr. Bennett, the weight of the encounter pressing heavily on her. Yet, rather than diminish her resolve, it strengthened her determination to honor Wilder's legacy. She knew that exposing the truth would come with risks, but silence was no longer an option. Together, they devised a plan to secure the journals and supporting documents, creating backups and hiding originals in safe locations. They reached out to trusted allies in the town, those whose memories and voices could bolster their cause. As Emily lay awake one night, the cabin silent, except for the soft rustle of the wind, she thought of the path ahead. The road was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but it was also filled with promise. Wilder's fight had sparked a flame, and now it was her turn to carry it forward. The forest outside whispered its ancient secrets, and Emily listened, ready to confront the shadows and bring light to a story long concealed. The first sign that Emily's discoveries had stirred the town came subtly. Strangers in unmarked vehicles parked too long near the cabin, unfamiliar faces watching from a distance, and whispered conversations that ceased the moment she approached. The air around Willow Creek shifted, heavy with suspicion and quiet tension. One morning, as Emily stepped outside her shelter, she noticed a black SUV idling near the dirt road. Its tinted windows reflected the pale dawn light, and the engine hummed softly. She felt a pang of unease, her instincts sharpened by the growing unease that had settled like a stone in her chest. The vehicle's presence was no accident. Over the following days, these silent sentinels appeared more frequently. Sometimes a lone man in a weathered jacket lingered near the edge of the forest, his gaze fixed steadily on the cabin. Other times, unfamiliar trucks rumbled past, their drivers casting wary glances her way. The warnings were unspoken but clear. Stop digging or face consequences. Emily's nights became restless, shadowed by the knowledge that she was being watched. The cool breeze that once brought comfort now carried a warning, rustling the broken roof and rattling the loose boards. Yet she refused to be intimidated. Clutching her growing belly, she felt a fierce protectiveness, not only for the child she carried, but for the truth she sought to uncover. Then, a letter arrived. Anonymous, slipped beneath the cracked door of the cabin. The paper was plain, the message brief but unmistakable. Drop this now, for your safety and the baby's. Emily held the note in trembling hands, the ink smeared slightly as her fingers tightened around it. Fear flickered briefly, but it was quickly replaced by determination. She would not be silenced by threats or fear. Her only solace came from Dr. Mark Bennett, who remained a steady presence amid the mounting pressure. Together, they discussed the growing risks, weighing each step carefully. Mark encouraged caution, but admired Emily's courage. "We're treading on dangerous ground," he warned during one of their late-night meetings at the library. "But the truth deserves to be told. Just promise me you'll stay safe." Emily nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Protecting herself and her unborn child while exposing a long-buried injustice was a delicate balance, and every move had to be deliberate. The tension escalated when Robert Gaines, the logging executive, made an unexpected visit to the cabin once more. This time, his tone was colder, less veiled. "Miss Carter," Gaines said, his voice low and firm, "this is your final warning. Walk away, or the consequences won't be limited to you alone." Emily met his gaze without flinching. "I won't be intimidated. The story deserves to be told." Gaines's eyes flickered with something unreadable before he turned and left, the door closing behind him like a threat echoing in the quiet. That night, Emily lay awake, the shadows in the cabin seeming to close in around her. The baby kicked softly, a reminder of hope amid the darkness. She thought of Thomas Wilder, the man who had fought a similar battle decades before, and found strength in his courage. Despite the warnings, Emily pressed on. She and Mark refined their plan to safeguard the journals and documents, creating hidden backups and spreading copies with trusted allies. They began organizing discreet meetings with townspeople who shared their desire for justice, careful to avoid drawing unwanted attention. The community's response was mixed. Some offered quiet support, their faces etched with worry and gratitude. Others turned away, fearful of the trouble the truth might bring. Emily understood their hesitation. The logging company's influence ran deep, and the scars of past conflicts lingered. One afternoon, as Emily returned to the cabin, she found the door ajar, an unmistakable sign that someone had been inside. Her heart pounded as she stepped cautiously inside, scanning the scattered papers and overturned belongings. Nothing appeared stolen, but the message was clear. She was not alone. Determined not to be cowed, Emily documented the intrusion and shared the incident with Mark and a few trusted friends. They agreed to increase vigilance, setting up simple traps and signals to alert them to any future trespassing. Amid the growing tension, Emily's pregnancy advanced, and the physical toll became harder to bear. Nights filled with aches and restless dreams, and days spent navigating the fragile ruins grew more exhausting. Yet, The fire within her burned brighter than ever. In moments of solitude, she returned to the journals, reading Wilder's words aloud, drawing strength from the man who had faced similar threats with unyielding resolve. His fight was now hers, the legacy she was determined to protect. Late one evening, as the wind howled through the broken cabin, Emily penned a letter to the local newspaper, carefully choosing her words to reveal the heart of the story without exposing herself to immediate danger. It was a call for justice, an appeal to the community's conscience. She handed the letter to a trusted friend for submission, knowing that once the story was out, there would be no turning back. As dawn broke over Willow Creek, Emily stood at the edge of the forest, the first light illuminating the path ahead. The warnings, the threats, the fear, they were all part of the journey now. But so was hope. The fight to honor Thomas Wilder's legacy was no longer hers alone. It had become a beacon for those who believed in truth, justice, and the enduring power of standing up against darkness. The afternoon sun hung low over Willow Creek when Robert Gaines arrived again, this time without the subtlety of his earlier visits. His polished black car rolled up the uneven dirt road to Emily's cabin, its tires crunching loudly against loose gravel. Emily, standing near the weakened porch, watched as the door to the vehicle opened and Gaines stepped out, his expression unreadable but his presence commanding. "I thought it best to speak with you directly," Gaines said, his voice smooth but edged with steel as he approached. "We've had our concerns about your activities here." Emily folded her arms, steadying herself against the ache in her back and the flutter of nerves in her belly. "I'm not doing anything illegal," she replied firmly. "I'm uncovering the truth." Gaines's eyes narrowed briefly, then softened into a practiced smile. "That may be so, but the truth can be dangerous. It has consequences you might not be prepared to face." He gestured toward the cabin, where scattered papers and worn journals lay exposed to the light. "I'm prepared to offer you a way out. Sell the cabin and all its contents to us. We'll ensure you're compensated fairly, and this situation will end quietly." Emily's gaze hardened. This isn't just about property or money. It's about justice. For Thomas Wilder, for the town, for the forest. I won't be bought. Gaines's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of impatience. "Think carefully. This isn't a game. Refuse, and you could jeopardize not only your safety, but that of your child." The warning hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and ominous. Emily's heart pounded, but she remained resolute. "I'm not afraid, and I won't be silenced." For a moment, Gaines regarded her silently, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But know this. We will be watching." With that, he turned and strode back to his car, the engine roaring as he disappeared down the road, leaving a trail of dust and unease behind. Emily stood alone, the weight of his threat settling over her like a shroud. Her hand instinctively rested on her stomach, the life within a fragile beacon of hope and vulnerability. She drew a deep breath, steadying herself amid the storm of fear and determination. Later that evening, Emily met with Dr. Mark Bennett in the dim light of the library's back room. The walls, lined with aging books and maps, seemed to close in around them as they spread out the journals and documents once more. "We need to protect these," Mark said, his voice low and urgent. "If Gaines and his associates are serious, they might try to seize or destroy the evidence." Emily nodded. "I've already started making copies and hiding the originals in secure places. But it's not enough." Markham leaned forward, eyes sharp. "We should consider involving the media, or at least trusted journalists. Public exposure could offer protection." Emily hesitated, the risks clear in her mind. The threats were real, and her growing pregnancy made escape more difficult. Yet the thought of burying the truth felt like betrayal. "I agree," she said finally. "But we have to be careful. We can't rush this." Together, they devised a cautious plan. Copies of the journals and key documents would be distributed discreetly to trusted contacts beyond Willow Creek. They would gather testimonies from locals willing to speak and prepare a timeline of events to present a compelling case. Emily's resolve deepened as she envisioned the impact of their work. It wasn't just about uncovering a forgotten past. It was about protecting the future of the land, the community, and the child she carried. Back at the cabin, the nights grew colder, the broken walls offering little shelter against the biting wind. Emily found solace in small routines. Tending to the fire, reading Wilder's journals by flickering lamplight, and speaking quietly to her unborn child. One evening, as the rain pattered softly against the roof, she discovered a worn photograph tucked between the pages of a journal. It depicted Thomas Wilder standing proudly among towering pines, a determined look in his eyes. For a moment, Emily felt a profound connection across time, a shared commitment to a cause greater than themselves. The next morning, she began renovating the cabin's foundation, reinforcing the walls with salvaged wood and tarps to keep out the elements. The physical labor was exhausting, but each nail hammered and board secured was a tangible step toward reclaiming the space. Emily's efforts did not go unnoticed. A few curious neighbors stopped by, offering cautious assistance or quiet words of encouragement. The community's response was tentative but growing, a subtle shift toward solidarity. Amid the challenges, Emily felt a fragile peace settling within her. The cabin, once a symbol of loss, was becoming a sanctuary, a place where history and hope intertwined. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the forest, Emily stood on the porch, cradling her belly. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and sacrifice. But she was ready to face it all. For Thomas Wilder, for her child, for the truth. The quiet hum of the town archive filled the stale air as Emily and Dr. Mark Bennett slipped inside one afternoon, careful to avoid drawing attention. The building, a weathered brick structure tucked behind the town hall, housed decades of records that could hold the key to exposing the logging company's long-hidden crimes. Dust motes danced in the slanting light from narrow windows, and the scent of old paper and varnish seemed to seep into the very walls. Mark pulled open a heavy metal cabinet, revealing stacks of brittle documents and faded ledgers. Emily scanned the spines of bound volumes, looking for anything that might bear the company's name or hint at illicit dealings. The task was daunting. Years of records filled every shelf, many uncatalogued and fragile from age. They worked methodically, sifting through contracts, correspondence, and land deeds. Mark's expertise proved invaluable, quickly identifying files of interest, permits granted under suspicious circumstances, letters hinting at bribes, and reports of logging beyond legal limits. Emily took meticulous notes, her fingers tracing the edges of documents stained with time. As the afternoon wore on, fatigue tugged at Emily's body, her pregnancy making the long hours more taxing than she let on. Yet her determination kept her pressing forward, each discovery fueling a growing sense of urgency. They had to find concrete proof, something undeniable that would bring the truth to light. Mark pointed to a ledger dated 1915, its pages yellowed but legible. "Here," he said. A series of shipments recorded under falsified permits. The volume of timber far exceeds what was legally approved. Emily leaned in, her eyes scanning the numbers and annotations. The ledger confirmed Wilder's suspicions detailed in the journals. The company had systematically exploited the forest, covering their tracks with forged documents and corrupted officials. With renewed vigor, they planned a covert visit to the corporate archives housed in a nearby town, a place rumored to hold original contracts and internal communications. The timing was critical. A public event scheduled in their hometown provided the perfect distraction. The night before their departure, Emily packed carefully, mindful of her condition. The drive to the neighboring town was long and winding, the headlights cutting through the darkness as she gripped the steering wheel. Mark navigated. Maps and notes spread across his lap. Upon arrival, they slipped into the archive, a secure building with tight controls and limited public access. Using contacts from Mark's academic network, they gained permission to review specific files under supervision, masking their true intentions. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Emily felt the weight of every step, the risk of discovery pressing on her like a shadow. They worked swiftly but cautiously, photographing documents and copying correspondence that detailed the company's deliberate cover-ups, illegal clear-cutting, and intimidation tactics against whistleblowers. The evidence was damning. Letters revealed directives to manipulate land surveys, conceal environmental damage, and silence opposition through threats and bribes. One report detailed a plan to discredit Thomas Wilder, painting him as a troublemaker intent on stalling progress. As they prepared to leave, Emily's fatigue caught up with her. The strain of pregnancy, combined with the adrenaline and stress, made each movement painful. Mark noticed her discomfort and gently urged her to rest, but she insisted on pressing forward. Driving back under a star-studded sky, the weight of their discovery settled between them. They had the proof needed to validate Wilder's journals and expose decades of corporate malfeasance. Yet the danger was far from over. Back in Willow Creek, Emily found solace in the cabin's fragile shelter, its battered walls a reminder of resilience amid destruction. She arranged the copied documents meticulously, preparing them for the next phase, sharing the truth with the world. Mark remained by her side, their partnership a source of strength and hope. Together, they drafted outlines for public presentations, media releases, and community meetings, mindful of the sensitivities involved. Despite the exhaustion, Emily's spirit burned brighter than ever. Each discovery was a step toward justice, a reclaiming of the land and legacy that had been stolen. The fight was no longer just hers or Wilder's. It belonged to the community, to anyone who believed that truth must prevail. As dawn broke over the forest, Emily gazed out at the trees, their silhouettes etched against the pale sky. The journey ahead was perilous and uncertain, but fortified by evidence and resolve. She was ready to face whatever came next. The first cries of dawn barely stirred the cabin when Emily awoke, a sudden sharp pain rippling through her abdomen. She gripped the rough wooden beam of the bed frame, breath quickening, the world narrowing to the small, dim room and the life growing within her. Despite the exhaustion that had settled deep into her bones over the past months, this moment felt charged with urgency and fragile hope. Mark Bennett, who had stayed nearby since the evidence gathering intensified, rushed to her side, his face etched with concern but steady and calm. "It's time," he said softly, helping her to sit up. Though the setting was far from the sterile hospital rooms she'd imagined during quieter days, the cabin now held a new significance. It was the birthplace of a legacy nurtured through hardship and hope. Outside, the forest stirred with the awakening light, birdsong threading through the cool morning air. Emily's grip tightened around Mark's hand as contractions came in waves, fierce and unyielding. The pain was raw, but beneath it lay a powerful current of strength, a testament to the journey she had endured. Hours passed in a blur of breath and determination. The journals, the letters, the hidden truths, they all converged in this moment. Emily's mind flickered to Thomas Wilder, the woodsman whose courage had set this path in motion. She imagined him standing amidst towering pines, resolute against storms and shadows, and drew strength from his enduring spirit. Finally, as the sun broke fully over the horizon, filling the cabin with golden light, Emily's cries softened into a weary gasp of relief. The room held a new sound, the fragile wail of a newborn, a voice carrying promise and renewal. Mark carefully wrapped the tiny pink bundle in a faded blanket, placing the baby gently into Emily's arms. She gazed down at the child, her son, his eyes fluttering open, reflecting the dawn's soft glow. Naming him Thomas Wilder Carter was both an homage and a vow, to honor the past and nurture a future shaped by truth and justice. In the days that followed, Emily's world shifted. The physical toll of childbirth mingled with a profound sense of purpose. Surrounded by the remnants of the cabin and the whispers of the forest, she found solace in the quiet moments with her son, each breath a reminder of resilience. Mark continued to support her, their partnership deepening beyond the shared mission. Together, they prepared to unveil the story that had remained hidden for too long. The evidence they had gathered, documents, testimonies, and the journals themselves, formed a tapestry of truth that demanded to be seen and heard. Plans for a public disclosure took shape. They arranged meetings with local leaders and journalists, mindful of the sensitivities and risks involved. The community's response was tentative but hopeful, stirred by the prospect of confronting a painful history and reclaiming its narrative. Emily's announcement to the town was deliberate, heartfelt. She spoke of Wilder's courage and the legacy of resilience woven through the forest and its people. The revelations of corporate greed, environmental destruction, and silenced voices resonated deeply, igniting a spark of reckoning. Media coverage soon followed, stories shared in newspapers and broadcasts that reached beyond Willow Creek. The logging company faced scrutiny and legal inquiries, its once hidden misdeeds brought to light through persistent investigation and the courage of a few determined souls. Amid the public attention, Emily felt a profound transformation. The cabin, once a burned ruin, became a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of uncovering truth and standing firm against injustice. Visitors came to see the place where history was reclaimed, where a mother's strength and a community's voice converged. As she cradled her son beneath the towering pines, Emily reflected on the journey, from the ashes of loss to the birth of new beginnings. Thomas Wilder Carter embodied not only her child's future, but the enduring spirit of those who fought to protect the land and honor the stories that shaped it. The path ahead remained uncertain, but in that moment, surrounded by the whispers of the forest and the warmth of new life, Emily knew the legacy would endure. The day the press conference was held, Willow Creek seemed to hold its breath. The small town's community center, usually quiet and unassuming, was transformed into a focal point of attention. Reporters from regional newspapers, local television crews, and curious townsfolk gathered in the modest hall, their murmurs filling the air with anticipation and tension. Banners bearing the words "Honoring Thomas Wilder, a legacy of truth and justice," hung alongside photographs and documents displayed on folding tables. Emily stood behind the podium, her newborn son cradled gently in her arms, a living symbol of the journey that had brought them here. Beside her, Dr. Mark Bennett arranged the evidence: the journals, letters, photographs, and copies of corporate documents that had exposed decades of wrongdoing. The weight of the moment settled heavily on her shoulders, But her resolve was unwavering. When the conference began, Emily's voice was steady as she recounted the story of Thomas Wilder, a man whose courage and dedication had been buried beneath years of silence and corporate greed. She spoke of the forest he had fought to protect, the community that had suffered in the shadows, and the importance of reclaiming their history. The evidence was laid bare. Letters revealing illegal logging activities, forged permits, and efforts to intimidate those who dared to speak out. Testimonies from local residents corroborated the journal's accounts, painting a vivid picture of a town grappling with the consequences of exploitation. As Emily spoke, the room grew quiet, the gravity of the revelations sinking in. The logging company, once an untouchable force, was now under scrutiny. Questions were raised, demands for accountability echoed through the hall, and a collective sense of reckoning took hold. The media coverage that followed was swift and intense. Stories ran in newspapers, broadcast segments aired on regional stations, and social media buzzed with discussions about the injustices uncovered. The logging company faced mounting public pressure, legal investigations, and calls for reparations to the town and the forest. Beyond the headlines, the impact was deeply personal. Willow Creek's residents, long silenced by fear and apathy, found their voices. Community meetings were held to discuss forest preservation, historical recognition, and the future of the land. Emily and Mark became advocates, guiding efforts to establish protections for the forest and honoring the legacy of those who had fought before. Amid the flurry of activity, Emily found moments of quiet reflection. The cabin, now a symbol of resilience and hope, stood as a testament to the power of truth. Visitors came from near and far, drawn by the story of a woman who had transformed desperation into empowerment and a community reclaiming its identity. Her son, Thomas Wilder Carter, grew surrounded by this renewed spirit, a living link between past struggles and future possibilities. Emily cherished the balance she had found, the harmony between honoring history and nurturing new life. As the town embarked on this new chapter, the scars of the past remained visible but no longer defining. The fight for justice had sparked a movement, one that extended beyond Willow Creek's borders, inspiring others to uncover their own histories and stand against injustice. In the quiet evenings, as the sun dipped low over the forest, Emily would walk the trails once tread by Thomas Wilder, feeling the weight of time and the promise of renewal. The story they had uncovered was not just about loss and betrayal, but about resilience, community, and the enduring power of truth. The legacy of Thomas Wilder, once hidden in the ashes of a burned cabin, now burned brightly, a beacon for generations to come. Months had passed since the press conference, and the burned cabin on the outskirts of Willow Creek had been transformed. What was once a charred relic of loss and secrecy was now a vibrant community center and museum dedicated to Thomas Wilder. A place where history was preserved and stories were shared. Emily stood at the entrance, watching visitors arrive. Families, schoolchildren, historians, and curious travelers drawn by the tale of courage and resilience. The air was filled with quiet excitement, the soft murmur of conversations blending with the rustling of leaves outside. Inside, exhibits displayed the journals, photographs, and artifacts unearthed from the cabin and its cellar, each piece telling a part of the story that had once been forgotten. The museum had become a symbol, a beacon honoring not only Thomas Wilder's fight to protect the forest, but also the broader struggle for justice and recognition. Emily had poured her heart into the project, working alongside volunteers to restore the cabin's structure, curate exhibits, and organize educational programs. The process had been both physically demanding and deeply fulfilling, a tangible way to honor the past while nurturing the future. Her son, Thomas Wilder Carter, now toddling through the museum halls with curious eyes, was a living embodiment of the legacy she sought to preserve. Emily often caught glimpses of him pausing before the displays, fingers reaching out to touch the worn pages or faded photographs, as if sensing the weight of the stories they held. The community center also became a gathering place for discussions on environmental preservation, local history, and social justice. Workshops and lectures brought together residents and experts, inspiring a new generation to engage with the land and its stories. Emily found purpose in these moments. Her journey from a woman seeking refuge to a leader and advocate complete in ways she had never anticipated. Despite the transformation of the cabin and the growing recognition of Thomas Wilder's contributions, Emily remained grounded. The path had been fraught with challenges, threats, physical hardship, and the emotional toll of revisiting painful history. Yet each obstacle had forged a deeper resilience within her. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast golden light through the museum's windows, Emily sat quietly with her son in her lap. The soft glow illuminated the worn leather of the journals resting on a nearby table. She traced the faded handwriting, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the charred remains of a burned cabin to this place of healing and remembrance, her thoughts drifted to the future, of the community strengthened by truth, the forest protected by awareness, and the legacy of those who had fought to ensure that stories like Thomas Wilder's would never again be lost to time. The museum was not just a tribute, but a living testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of honoring voices once silenced. As Thomas reached up to touch her face with small, curious hands, Emily smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace. The struggles and sacrifices had woven together into a tapestry of hope and renewal. The story that began in ashes had blossomed into a legacy that would inspire generations. In the quiet moments, surrounded by history and life, Emily knew that the work was far from over. But for now, she embraced the balance she had found, the harmony between past and present, loss and hope, silence and voice. The burned cabin stood strong once more, not just as a structure of wood and stone, but as a sanctuary of memory and possibility. And in its heart, the story of Thomas Wilder and the woman who brought it back to light would live on, forever a beacon in the forest's embrace.